Next. This is Belfast, Northern Ireland. This is one of the, in Belfast there's 16 dividing walls. Now, unlike in Nicosia and formerly in Berlin, it did not separate the city into two, but there were 16, and still to this day there are 16 different peace walls, quote-unquote peace walls, to keep the sides away from each other. And again, using very simple terms, keeping Protestants and Catholics away from each other, separating those neighborhoods. And these exist today, and here's another example. We have great success in Northern Ireland today with a major peace agreement, the Good Friday Agreement in 1998, and a major agreement now where the two extremists are in power-sharing government together in Northern Ireland. So great success, and we can send up the balloons and everything, and it's wonderful. But look at this city. This city today still exists this way. And what do you tell a Catholic kid or a Protestant kid about why these walls are here? And what does this mean? I thought we have peace. Why do we have these walls? So this is an example where you cannot forget the urban local part to this story. You can sign a diplomatic peace agreement and you can have famous handshakes on a lawn, but if you're not tending to the ground up, the bottom up stuff where people live and work and love and do everything, you're not addressing the main part of people's existence. So you need that bottom up peace building along with the top down peace making. Next. This is Sarajevo, Bosnia. This is the saddest city I've ever been in my life. This city was surrounded for 4.5 years by artillery and gunmen, and 1,600 citizens of this city were killed. Many children were killed. People were killed burying their own relatives because the cemeteries were exposed to the gunners up on the hills. This is also, in a very emotional place, this is also a very uplifting story in a way. This says where once there were playgrounds. This is a former playground area in Sarajevo that became a cemetery because the cemetery was away from where those gunners and shooters and artillery fighters could shoot at them. So this gentleman who's in the front here is telling us about this. He talked about taking his grandchild with him to this playground, and now look what it is. And the other thing that's very uplifting about this is that people can make a difference, and we hear a lot about political leaders that use the ethnic card very negatively and use it for hatred, and that's how they get in office and that's how they stay in office. This is an example of a man who believes not in doing that, and he was the military commander for the regiments that stayed in the city, defending the city from this onslaught. Most of the arms and gunnery were fired by Bosnian Serbs upon the Bosniak Muslim population and also Serb and Croat populations of the city. So the Bosnian Serbs, the aggressors here, the most amazing thing about this man who stood up for multiculturalism, who stood up for the belief in coexistence, is ethnically he's a Bosnian Serb. So it just shows you don't have to line up ethnically all the time, and that there are true leaders. This is a true leader as opposed to other so-called leaders who take the very easy path of hatred and ethnic separation. His main concern is how do we not teach children war? And this is something that maybe we can talk about in the questions and answers, because it's one thing for adults to be fighting these wars, but what do we tell our children about why they shouldn't do the same thing? How do we not pass on through the generations the hatred that has exercised itself in some of these circumstances? Next. Another picture of Sarajevo. This is the Parliament building for the Bosnian state. Anything that spoke of Bosnianism was a target of the Bosnian Serb and Serbian armies, and for 4 years this tall building in the eastern middle of the city was just bombarded constantly. That remains that way today as a symbol of the bombarded concept of multiculturalism. Next. Now what is this doing here? Frank Gehry, my goodness. Frank Gehry. This is an interesting story. This is Bilbao, Spain. Bilbao is in the Basque Country. And the Basque Country for decades has been famous for Basque separatism and for extremism and for violence and for the ETA paramilitary, which still exists today, the ETA. Bilbao, the city of Bilbao, since it was given a lot of powers since the end of the Franco regime, has used those urban powers to really reformulate and revitalize its city. This was a beat-up industrial city, and it had no chance at all of landing this Guggenheim Museum that the Guggenheim Foundation was out scouting around for a site in Europe. And when they first were presented with Bilbao as the possibility, they just laughed because they thought, well, what is Bilbao? Where is Bilbao? Isn't it a beat-up old city, which it was? But through some amazing innovative leadership, entrepreneurialism, not only the Guggenheim Museum of Frank Gehry in Bilbao, but it's a huge revitalization of that city. And a lot of people, me included, actually think this is an example, if you revitalize a city enough, new housing, new services, you actually can, over time, and this is the important part, over time, start to get people on the side of the side of moderate leadership. And they don't cling to the extremist message as much anymore. And over time they think, okay, this government is doing this, it's doing very good things. Maybe we don't need that outright independence that Basque extremists have been fighting for decades. So it leads to potentially a moderation of that extremist message, and it starts to potentially alienate people from the extremist message. That, of course, can be good. That can also be very dangerous when extremists feel alienated, right? Okay, more on that maybe later. This is Johannesburg, South Africa. I talked about the economic disparities before. I flew over in a helicopter. This is 1995. This is white Johannesburg. Within 1 kilometer of this is Alexandria Township. Next. And if you can see that, this is one of the examples of one of the black townships in the city of Johannesburg. And the shelters, these are not housing. This is not housing. This is lean-tos, any sort of shelters, literally falling down the hillside in a place that no one would ever build, close to a stream, open toilets, no sanitation, no water, just absolutely rudimentary services, especially during apartheid. And then after apartheid, the question becomes, what do you do with this? And a lot of people think, well, the easy thing is let's get rid of all this. But that's easy to say, but it's very difficult because it costs a lot of money. And these are the places where people live. So a lot of black Africans live, South Africans live here. So a lot of people think really what you do is you go in and service these areas so that they have some minimal quality of life. If you try to do more drastic relocation efforts, it's going to cost a lot of money, which South Africa does not have because it's being watched very closely by neoliberal international monetary regimes, such as the World Bank and the International Monetary Fund. Next. This is from Barcelona. Only one slide, I think, from Barcelona. No, 2 slides. This is showing the repression under Franco. Barcelona suffered tremendously. Barcelona was the source of Catalan nationalism. The last thing that Franco ever wanted was any sort of regionalist nationalism, strong believer in authoritarian Spanish centralism. So Barcelona suffered tremendously. If you've been to Barcelona, you know the story of this over the last 25, 30 years. It has grown into this cosmopolitan, absolutely exciting, internationally connected city